I lost. I lost my freedom behind Tupac. I lost business. I lost house, a whole lot of shit.
From a prison cell in California, Suge Knight just dropped a bombshell. He's accusing Snoop Dogg of secretly funding the tragedy of Tupac Shakur, and the evidence he's pointing to has the industry buzzing. During a February 2025 interview with The Art of Dialogue,
I believe him because he wasn't talking just to be talking. I felt he was also coming straight because there was a big war behind that. A war that they lost. And I think it was a war that destroyed their neighborhood.
Knight didn't hold back for a second. He claimed that Snoop's been trying to bail out Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the only man ever charged in connection with Shakur's 1996 shooting, because he's talking too much. Keefe D's trial was supposed to start in March 2025, but out of nowhere.
You get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the...
It got delayed to February 2026 after his lawyers said they found new evidence that could clear him. That sudden delay, mixed with Snoop's alleged push for Keefe's freedom, made Suge's words sound way more dangerous than just jailhouse chatter. It felt like a warning shot straight to the top of the music world, and that question everyone's whispering. Why would Snoop want to silence the one man who could finally tell the truth about that night? Hit harder than ever. It was like throwing a lit match into 30 years of gasoline. People have seen Suge pull wild moves before, but this time, he didn't sound like the brash death row boss from the 90s. He sounded like a man trying to unload secrets before it's too late.
He said it was, according to him, he said it was security that accepted money, participated in it, and it was so-called homies.
Serving a 28-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter, Suge has been using his podcast Collect Call to rebuild his legend, or maybe rewrite it. And ever since Snoop bought De4th Row Records in 2022, the empire Suge built from the ground up. Their feud's been boiling over louder than ever. Suge Knight never bought into the idea that the De4th Row sale was legit.
Unless whether I feel he was involved in what I think he was involved.
Not for a second. From his cell, he demanded proof, calling out Snoop for destroying hip-hop and turning the label's once fearless legacy into a brand stunt. But now he's pushing it even further, tying Snoop not just to betrayal, but to blood and conspiracy. Whether this is revenge or a dying man's truth dump depends on which side of those prison walls you trust.
Keefe D said he told Rat James that, look, it's big money in this. Only thing Puffy want to do is pay $1 million to have both of them. He told me that.
And let's be real, the timing's too perfect to ignore. Just weeks before Suge's latest outburst, Nevada prosecutors quietly admitted that Keefe D's defense team found new files buried deep in old LAPD archives, files that might point to people who were never even charged in the 1996 ambush. Then suddenly Suge goes on record and drops Snoop's name.
As soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned.
Saying he helped fund Keefe's bail like it was straight out of a crime doc. Snoop hasn't said a word publicly, though his lawyers reportedly called the whole thing pure fiction. Still, it's hard to shake how close these worlds really are. Keefe D, a self-admitted Southside Compton Crip, isn't some random name. He's tied to both the East Coast-West Coast feud and Snoop's own old neighborhood circle. So when Suge hints that Snoop knew exactly what was happening that night, it lands different.
If you look at it, they committed fraud. They committed bankruptcy fraud. I didn't lose my company by doing it.
Especially knowing Keefe once described the shooters using a secure Nextel channel linked to De4th Row's own security team. Snoop Dogg had just beaten his homicide case, and De4th Row Records was running the game, the most feared label in all of hip-hop.
I say a week before he was best of friends. 2 days before he I don't think he...
Then Suge Knight made one of the boldest moves in music history. He walked into Clinton Correctional Facility with a $14 million check and walked out with Tupac Shakur. Overnight, Snoop's throne had a new king, and De4th Row's energy flipped completely. The label that once moved to Snoop's smooth, laid-back rhythm now pulsed with Shakur's raw fire. Even Snoop admitted years later on Logan Paul's 2022 Impulsive podcast that Tupac's arrival changed everything. He said it made him feel like he got pushed to the background, and that one confession has haunted every interview since. At first, though, there was no beef. Snoop and Pac were tight. They dropped two of America's most wanted, dressed in matching red suits, looking like straight gangland royalty. But insiders say the vibe turned quick. Shakur was passionate, loyal, and always on edge, convinced his enemies from New York were plotting against him. Snoop, ever the cool-headed diplomat, wasn't down with that hate. So when he went on Hot 97 in September 96 and casually praised Biggie and Puffy, Pac's sworn rivals, it was like throwing a torch into gasoline. Within days, Tupac was livid. Suge later said Pac told him, "Man, I put everybody on death row, I put everyone on my album, and now this dude goes on the radio saying he's riding with them." From that moment, the friendship was dead. But what came next, according to Suge, wasn't just a fallout, it was a setup. Every clue Suge drops now feels like another breadcrumb leading back to that fateful night in Vegas. The official story says Pac's car was ambushed after the Tyson fight at the MGM Grand. Suge driving, Pac in the passenger seat. 4 bullets tearing through the door. Warren G once said Snoop was at his house that night, locked in on a Nextel radio, the kind only death row security was supposed to have. He said Snoop was listening in real time as chaos unfolded in Vegas. Then suddenly the calls started coming in. Pac got shot. At first, that sounded like tragic timing. But after Suge's new claims, it feels way more like surveillance than coincidence. That Nextel clue can't just be brushed off. In the 90s, those two-way radios weren't toys. They were encrypted lines built for private networks. Death Row security used them to coordinate movements during high-risk events like the Tyson fight that night. And Suge's saying Snoop had no reason to even own one because he wasn't part of the Vegas crew. So how was he hearing live chatter from hundreds of miles away? That's the riddle setting this whole firestorm off. When Warren said that the radio was hitting him all the way from Vegas, it suggested Snoop had a direct line into a channel meant only for Death Row's security team. The same channel the shooters allegedly used to confirm the hit. That's the part giving everyone chills. But this isn't the first time Suge Knight has thrown blame beyond the usual suspects. Over the years, he's accused everyone from Puff Daddy to crooked cops, even claiming Pac never actually lost his life. Back in 2014, he told TMZ that Tupac's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar on an island. It sounded wild then, but it tied Suge to a much bigger web of strange, lingering theories. Michael Nice, a former security officer linked to the Black Panthers, even claimed he helped smuggle Pac to Cuba, saying the hospital scene was a full-on body swap. Michael Nice told TMZ, "Why you think nobody been arrested if they said they the one that did it because Shakur not gone?" Then just days before he promised to drop proof, he suddenly passed away in 2018. And that silence only made the rumors louder. Those wild theories exploded again this year when an investigator named Jimmy Poole posted photos from Belize claiming they showed Tupac alive in his 40s, chilling on a beach like nothing ever happened. Sounds insane, right? But in hip-hop's tabloid trenches, the unbelievable always sits just one step away from the truth. Because if Pac really did survive, or if someone inside Death Row helped stage his escape, the biggest question slams back into focus. Would Snoop have gained more from Pac staying alive or disappearing completely? Suge Knight clearly believes the second option. And when you look at what was happening between Pac signing and that Vegas night, it starts to sound less like paranoia and more like pattern. By then, Snoop was already pulling away from Suge, frustrated by control issues, money disputes, and the constant street politics weighing down the label. He might have beaten that murder case, but the gang stigma still followed him everywhere. Then Pac came in, loud, fearless, unpredictable, and suddenly law enforcement was back sniffing around. According to former Outlaws member Napoleon, Snoop dimmed his light so Shakur could shine, but behind the scenes, he hated how fast his spotlight faded. Suge now says that jealousy didn't just stay emotional, it got operational. In his February 2025 Art of Dialogue interview, Suge dropped his most dangerous claim yet, that Snoop told Thaw Dog Pound's Daz Dillinger not to travel to Vegas that weekend, saying, "Something's gonna happen." If that's true, it means Snoop had advance warning of a setup that would end in tragedy. It's the same Nextel setup Warren G mentioned, the same system Suge says Death Row security used to report every single move that night. So if someone on that line said got it the moment the shots went off, Who was really listening on the other end? Snoop's defenders swear this whole story is just Suge Knight's revenge tour, a bitter man spinning tales from behind bars. They point to Snoop's old interviews where he broke down talking about visiting Pac in the hospital, saying he fainted when he saw him unresponsive, and that Afeni Shakur comforted him in the hallway. That version hasn't changed in decades. But Suge fires right back, claiming Snoop never visited the hospital at all, accusing him of making it up for sympathy. When you line up both sides, they don't just clash, they completely cancel each other out. He's lying, and it's not a small lie. Meanwhile, the hip-hop machine keeps cashing in on nostalgia like nothing's wrong. Snoop's now the official owner of Death Row Records. He's rebranded it, dropped back on Death Row, and even built a virtual version of the label inside the metaverse. To fans, it's a comeback story, the student becoming the boss. But to Suge, it's pure disrespect. He's accused Snoop of faking paperwork, dropping flops, and draining the soul out of what Death Row once stood for. But compared to what Suge is implying now, all that business beef feels small, because this time, he's not just talking about betrayal or money, he's hinting that Snoop had blood on his hands before he ever had a boardroom. Keith D's case, once considered closed and done, is cracking wide open again. Old wounds are bleeding back to the surface, and the courtroom might finally drag some buried names into the light. His legal team's push to block certain witness statements suggests key figures, possibly tied to Death Row, could be subpoenaed if the trial moves forward. So now Suge's sudden attacks on Snoop might not be random rants at all. They could be strategic damage control, a way for him to rewrite the narrative before the courtroom starts asking the wrong questions. But there's one thing nobody can just brush off: Warren G's story about that night. He never retracted it, never changed a word. He said Snoop's Nextel radio was picking up real-time chatter from Vegas, and nobody's ever explained how that was even possible. That's where Suge's theory, as wild as it sounds, fills the gap, not with logic, but with fire. He claims the only people with access to those frequencies were Death Row's security team and the shooters themselves. So if Snoop's device really buzzed with voices shouting, "Got it," the moment Pac was hit, that would place him, at least technologically, inside that moment, even from 270 miles away. According to Suge, that one word, "got it," wasn't just noise. It was the confirmation code for the hit, sent across a line Snoop should have never had access to. The weight of that claim is massive, even for a story already soaked in betrayal, power, and paranoia. If Suge Knight's telling the truth, this could drag one of hip-hop's biggest icons right back into the crosshairs. Because if Snoop wasn't in Vegas that night, then how did his radio pick up a voice saying, "Got it," the exact moment Tupac was hit? That's the question haunting every corner of this story. Keith D isn't just another suspect. He's the only man ever charged in connection with Tupac's shooting. And according to Suge, Snoop's crew is desperate to keep him quiet. When Las Vegas police unsealed that 2023 warrant calling Keith D the shot caller who orchestrated the hit, it confirmed what investigators have hinted at for decades. Keith wasn't just there, he was in charge. Court records even mentioned a $1 million bounty tied to the ambush, a number Suge now links straight to Snoop's alleged role. And from his prison cell, Suge dropped another chilling line. They even had somebody talk to me and say, "Hey, you can help him get free." That one sentence hints at backdoor deals still moving quietly, nearly 3 decades after the bullets flew. You can trace this entire tension back to Snoop's jaw-dropping 2022 purchase of Death Row Records, the same empire that united, divided, and destroyed so many lives. Reports pinned the price tag around $50 million, and to the public it looked like a triumphant full-circle moment, the student taking back the throne. But to Suge and a few old-school insiders, it didn't look like redemption at all. It looked like a cover-up wearing a business suit. They saw it as a takeover born from guilt, not legacy. Because when you think about it, that move didn't just give Snoop control of the Death Row name. It gave him control of every file, every tape, every secret buried in that vault. The symbolism is wild. The very man Tupac believed betrayed him now owns the same label forever tied to his downfall. It's almost too poetic, too twisted to ignore. Snoop Dogg lives in a strange duality and half global superstar, half gangster legend. On one hand, he's the laid-back uncle of pop culture, cooking with Martha Stewart and coaching kids' football teams. But on the other, he's a survivor of the most ruthless era in West Coast rap, a man whose name is still whispered in connection with a homicide case, and Street Ties LA never really forgot. When he sat down on Impulsive in 2022, Snoop got emotional recounting that hospital visit. He said he held Tupac's hand, begged him to hang on, and that the moment never left my mind. It was heartbreaking, cinematic even. But then Suge Knight stomped that story flat with one cold line. That definitely didn't happen. Snoop didn't go to the hospital. That's a lie for Suge. It wasn't just about calling out a memory, right? It was about seizing control of the legend itself. The contradiction between those two versions is massive. One man swears he fainted in grief, the other says he never even walked through the door. So who's telling the truth? And who benefits from their version? Because the answer might not be emotional at all, it might be financial. After Tupac's death, his estate became a gold mine. 7 posthumous albums, countless documentaries, merch lines, and licensing deals. All of it pumping millions into Death Row's legacy and value. Even as the label got sold off and chopped into pieces like a family fortune under dispute, one man was always left watching from a prison cell, Suge Knight himself. Everybody ate off Shakur's demise, Suge said in a phone interview earlier this year, his voice low and rough. Everybody except the cat who was riding with him when them bullets flew. That bitterness bleeds through every word he speaks. In Suge's eyes, the industry didn't just move on, it rewrote history, polishing the blood-soaked chaos of the 90s into nostalgic legend while he sat behind bars, watching it all get sanitized. So when Snoop unveiled his shiny, rebranded Death Row, complete with NFT drops and metaverse launches, it didn't feel like innovation to Suge. It felt like desecration. The same label built on fear, loyalty, and street code was now a digital brand wrapped in smiles and family-friendly interviews. The irony's almost Shakespearean, betrayal reborn as redemption, while the man who built it all watches from a cell. Meanwhile, Keith D sits in a Nevada jail, his trial pushed yet again, now set for February 2026. Every delay tightens the mystery around what really happened that night. Prosecutors say he's the last man alive who knows who gave the order, but Suge insists he's the only one still telling bits of the truth. And those bits, he claims, lead straight back to the new owner of Death Row. If Keith D's defense really has fresh evidence that could clear him, Suge swears there's a name buried in those discovery files that the public isn't ready to see. And if Snoop's team truly is, as Suge alleges, offering quiet favors or backdoor deals to keep that man silent, then the real question becomes, what truth are they trying to bury before that trial finally begins? Some see Suge Knight as a bitter man clinging to ghosts. Others see him as the last soldier standing from an era that never really died. But one thing's undeniable, every time he opens his mouth, the whole industry stops to listen. His latest demand to see the paperwork, proving that Snoop really owns Death Row, shows how personal this feud has become. For Suge, this isn't about royalties or ego anymore. It's about reclaiming legacy before someone else rewrites it. The irony cuts deep. While Suge's locked behind bars, Snoop's out here as the polished face of the same culture their feud nearly destroyed. He's hosting game shows, dropping cereal lines, performing at the Super Bowl. The smiling ambassador of peace and success. But Suge keeps whispering that behind that charm is a man with unfinished business. That claim about Snoop telling Daz Dillinger, "Don't go to Vegas, something's gonna happen," still hangs heavy in the air. It's never been proven, but it's never disappeared either. Add that to the eerie Nextel radio detail, the alleged $1 million bounty, and the fight over whether Snoop ever saw Pac in that hospital room, and you've got a timeline that just won't rest. Now, with Keith D's trial pushed to 2026, Snoop sitting on the death row throne, and Suge still talking from his cell, the pieces keep circling back to that same night in Vegas. The question after all these years isn't just who pulled the trigger, it's who's still protecting them. Nearly 3 decades later, we're not closer to answers, only more tangled motives, shifting power, and men trying to outlive their own legends. So what do we believe? The polished version, all forgiveness, peace, and branding, or the prisoner's version, where loyalty turned lethal and truth still bleeds through the cracks? Drop your thoughts below, because this saga is far from finished. Stay curious, stay watching, because in this game, the truth always finds a microphone.